Sweetie, the cars on this floor aren't in your range.
I just wanted to look at the new line.
She didn't know who she was turning away.
Look somewhere else. This isn't for people like you.
Catherine's knees buckled, the color drained from her face. But Denise wasn't done, not even close. The silver Mercedes pulled up slow, real slow, the kind of slow that makes you hold your breath because you can feel the whole world about to tilt on its axis. Crushed oyster shells popped and ground under the tires like tiny bones breaking. The salt air off the Carolina coast hung thick and wet, clinging to everything. The wraparound porch, the marble foyer glowing just inside the double doors, the coral and gold Hermes scarf knotted tight at Catherine Mercer's throat, like some kind of designer noose she tied on herself. And Catherine was still going, still running her mouth, still standing there on that porch with her chin lifted and her pale blue eyes narrowed down at Denise like she was something stuck to the bottom of a nude patent leather heel. "I can smell the thrift store on you." Catherine's voice cracked across the humid air like a whip. "You don't belong here. You have never belonged here. This is a private property and you are trespassing. And if you don't remove yourself from these steps in the next 30 seconds, I will have you removed." Denise didn't move. Not a flinch, not a blink. Her hands stayed clasped loosely in front of her plain navy cotton sundress, the thin gold wedding band catching a sliver of late-afternoon sun. The faded olive canvas tote hung on her left shoulder like it always did. Her expression? Calm. Unreadable. Like she was watching weather pass. That stillness? That's the thing Catherine should have been afraid of. Because the Mercedes door opened, and James Aldridge stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver-gray hair combed back neat, that rumpled beige linen jacket hanging off him the way expensive things hang off men who don't care about looking expensive. He had the dark brown leather portfolio tucked under his right arm, always under his right arm, and his hazel eyes swept from Denise to Catherine and then back to Denise, and something in his face just collapsed. "Catherine." His voice cracked on the second syllable, cracked like old plaster. "What are you doing?" It wasn't a question. Catherine spun on him with that brisk, territorial stride, one hand already on her hip. "James, thank God. This woman has been loitering on the property for 20 minutes. I've already called the police. She refuses to leave, and frankly, she looks like she wandered off a Greyhound bus." "Stop talking." James said it quiet, almost gentle, which made it worse. He looked at Denise, and his stooped posture bent even further, deferential, the way he always leaned when he spoke to her. "Mrs. Carter, I am so sorry." Catherine's platinum blonde bob didn't move, but her whole body did, a half step backward, heels scraping crushed shell. "What?" "She's my boss." James Aldridge's voice was steady now, but his hands weren't. The leather portfolio trembled against his ribs. "She owns it. She owns all of it. Every building you manage, every property in this portfolio. She is Carter Shoreline Holdings." Hold on Catherine's face. Watch it happen. Watch the sharp, angular jaw go slack. Watch those thin, arched eyebrows climb toward her hairline. Watch the flush drain from her fair pink cheeks until she's the color of the cream silk blouse she tucked so carefully into those tailored white linen trousers this morning. Her knees buckled, just slightly, just enough. And Denise still didn't speak, didn't need to. Now, let me take you back, because this moment didn't fall out of the sky. This moment was built, brick by brick, by a woman the world refused to see. 4 years earlier. Beaufort, South Carolina. Not the postcard Beaufort with the Spanish moss and the waterfront mansions. The other Beaufort. The one tourists drive past on the way to Hilton Head. A narrow shotgun house on a dirt road with a tin roof that sang when it rained and screamed when it stormed. Ruth Carter came through the screen door at 6:45 every evening, smelling like bleach and other people's luxury. 71 years old. Hands raw and cracked from scrubbing marble countertops in vacation rentals she could never afford to sleep in. She'd been cleaning rich folks' second homes since before Denise was born, and she never once complained about the work. What she complained about was the waste. "Come here," Ruth would say, waving Denise over to the kitchen table with those roughened fingers. "Look at this." She'd pull out a crumpled property listing she'd grabbed from a recycling bin at one of the rentals, and she'd teach how to read a foundation by the cracks in the stucco, how to spot water damage hiding behind crown molding by the faint ripple in the paint, how to tell if a porch was cosmetic or structural by pressing your thumb into the wood near the base. Ruth's lesson was always the same, and she said it so many times it wore a groove into Denise's brain like a river cuts limestone. Rich people never look at the bones. They see the marble and the chandeliers and the view. They never get on their knees and check what's holding it all up. Denise listened. Denise always listened. Spelman College, full academic scholarship. The quiet girl who sat front row center in every class and never raised her hand unless she had the answer locked down cold. Then Wharton for the MBA, the only black woman in her cohort. No parties, no networking brunches, no schmoozing over craft cocktails with classmates whose fathers owned hedge funds. Just the work. Just the library at 11 p.m., and the spreadsheets and the case studies, and the bone-deep understanding that nobody was going to hand her a damn thing. A decade followed at an Atlanta commercial real estate firm where her colleagues smiled past her in hallways and CC'd her last on emails and assumed she was the assistant when clients walked in. She let them. Every single time, she let them. Because while they were busy not seeing her, she was studying Barrier Island erosion patterns, tax lien records, estate probate filings. She was mapping the entire southeastern coastline's vulnerability to climate shift and generational wealth transfer, and nobody thought to ask what the quiet woman in the plain clothes was building. At 37, Denise walked into a small attorney's office in Atlanta and signed the incorporation papers for Carter Shoreline Holdings. No website photo, no press release, no social media profile, just corporate trusts and LLCs layered like armor, invisible by design. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind as the pen left the page. The person they don't see coming is the person who sees everything. Denise slid the papers into her canvas tote and walked out into the Georgia heat. Carter Shoreline's first acquisition, a distressed beachfront property on Kiawah Island that everyone else passed on, and I mean everyone. The big brokerages took one look at that storm-wrecked estate sitting crooked on its foundation, saw the waterlogged hardwood, the collapsed veranda, the sand drifts piled against what used to be French doors, and they called it a teardown. Done. Move on. Not worth the headache. 3 different luxury firms sent appraisers out there after Hurricane Matthew chewed through the coast, and every single one came back with the same verdict. Bulldoze it. Start fresh. The lot's worth something, the structure's worth nothing. Denise saw something else entirely. She drove down from Atlanta in the 2012 Honda Accord, the one with the dent on the passenger door where a shopping cart caught it in a Kroger parking lot 2 years prior. And she pulled into that gravel drive on a Tuesday morning, wearing work boots and a plain gray t-shirt, her jet black hair secured in that simple low twist with the tortoiseshell clip, the thin gold wedding band catching light as she shaded her eyes against the sun. No entourage, no assistant, just the worn canvas tote in faded olive green slung over her left shoulder, stuffed with county records and structural surveys she'd pulled herself. Ruth taught her what to look for. Not the damage, the bones. And the bones of that Kiawah estate were magnificent. Heart pine beams from the 1920s, the kind of old-growth lumber you literally cannot buy anymore. A foundation that had shifted but hadn't cracked, meaning the original engineers knew what they were doing. Copper plumbing under the rot, a roof line that just needed to be resheeted, not reimagined. Denise walked every room. She pressed her palm against load-bearing walls. She got on her knees in standing water and checked the subfloor joists with a flashlight. She bought it through a blind trust for 40 cents on the dollar. The sellers were thrilled to get anything at all. Now here's where it gets good. During the restoration, Denise was on site almost every day. Work boots, plain clothes, clipboard sometimes, but mostly just her eyes and her memory. She walked contractors through the property room by room, pointing out what to preserve, what to replace, where the original molding profiles needed to be matched exactly. She knew the difference between quarter-sawn oak and rift-sawn oak. She knew which plaster techniques were period-appropriate for a 1920s low-country estate. She knew all of it because Ruth had spent 30 years teaching her before a single incorporation paper was ever signed. And not one contractor on that job site knew she was the owner. They assumed she was the project manager's assistant, some grunt doing walkthroughs for whoever actually held the checkbook. One foreman, a guy named Dale who chewed tobacco and talked too loud, actually asked her to grab him a coffee from the cooler once, just pointed at her without looking up from his phone, like she was there to serve. Denise got him the coffee. She let them assume. Every single time. Because the person they don't see coming is the person who sees everything. And Denise saw everything. She saw which subcontractors cut corners. She saw which ones showed up early and stayed late. She kept a quiet list in a composition notebook she carried in that olive green tote. And when the project was done, the contractors who'd earned her trust got called back for the next job. The ones who hadn't? They never heard from Carter Shoreline again and never knew why. The flip changed the game. That Kiawah property sold for triple the acquisition cost. Triple. A storm-damaged estate that every big brokerage in the Southeast had written off as scrap lumber, and Denise Carter turned it into a 7-figure sale that sent a quiet ripple through coastal luxury markets. Word spread in certain circles. Tight circles, the kind where people trade information over bourbon at private clubs Denise would never set foot in. Someone is buying up distressed coastal luxury properties. Someone with taste, patience, and very deep pockets. But nobody could find a face. Nobody could find a name. Just LLC filings buried in Delaware corporate registries, and a law firm in Atlanta that returned every inquiry with the same polite, immovable response. Our client is not accepting meetings at this time. The portfolio grew fast after that. Hilton Head, Defusky Island, St. Simons, Jekyll Island. One after another the same pattern. Distressed property, blind trust acquisition, meticulous restoration, sale at a price that made people's heads turn. Denise hired James Aldridge as her go-to appraiser somewhere around property number 8. A tall, broad-shouldered man with silver-gray hair cropped short and neatly combed back, hazel eyes behind deep smile lines, always carrying that dark brown leather portfolio under his right arm like it was welded there. James had been in low-country real estate for 25 years. He was honest, he was discreet, and he was one of maybe 5 people on this earth who knew Denise Carter's face and could connect it to Carter Shoreline Holdings. He liked her immediately, respected her even faster. Said once, in that measured, deferential way he had of leaning in when he spoke, that she had a better eye for structural value than anyone he'd ever worked with, and that included 3 decades of architects. Denise just nodded, didn't need the compliment, appreciated it, moved on. Now, let's talk about Catherine Mercer, Hilton Head's self-appointed queen of luxury real estate, top producer at Harrington and Cole, the most prestigious brokerage on the island. Platinum blonde hair and a smooth, shoulder-length bob with that deep side part. Pale blue eyes like chips of winter sky. The angular jawline always tilted slightly upward because Catherine Mercer had never once in her 48 years looked at the world from anything but above. The coral and gold silk scarf knotted at her throat. Always there, always Hermes, always a statement. The Range Rover, the client dinners at private waterfront restaurants where she held court like she owned the coastline itself. Catherine had heard the rumors about Carter Shoreline. Everyone in low-country luxury had. And Harrington and Cole had been courting that mysterious LLC for months, sending polished pitch decks and listing proposals to the Atlanta law firm, angling for agreements on those 23 properties. Every single inquiry came back the same way. Our client is not accepting meetings at this time. Catherine took it personally. She was the gatekeeper of Hilton Head Luxury. She decided who got access, who got listings, who mattered. And some faceless LLC was shutting her out? That wasn't business. That was an insult. She had no idea who she was looking for. Denise closes on her 23rd property. Her portfolio is valued at $187 million. She still drives the 2012 Honda Accord with the dent on the passenger door. She still wears the simple twist. Nobody in the luxury real estate world knows her face. 3 months before that satisfying confrontation we opened with, an old man named Harold Beaumont died in his sleep on a Tuesday night. 91 years old. Oxygen tank beside the bed. A view of the Calabogie Sound through 12-foot windows he hadn't been able to see out of for the last 3 years because the cataracts took everything. But those windows. Lord, those windows. Palmetto Point sat on 4.5 acres at the southern tip of Hilton Head Island, right where the tidal creek bent toward the Atlantic, and the live oaks grew so thick their branches wove together overhead like the fingers of old women praying. 12,000 square feet of low-country architecture, tabby foundation, heart-tine floors original to the 1920s build, a wraparound veranda that stretched the full length of the house on 3 sides. The kind of veranda where you could hear the pluff mud exhale at low tide, where the fiddler crabs clicked across the dockboards at dawn, where the salt air settled into the woods so deep you could smell it in January. 6 bedrooms, a library with floor-to-ceiling cypress shelving, a summer kitchen separate from the main house, connected by a covered breezeway lined with jasmine that bloomed white every May, a boathouse, a deep-water dock, and the oaks. Massive, ancient, draped in Spanish moss so heavy it swayed like curtains in any breeze off the water. The kind of property Ruth Carter used to clean on her hands and knees. That detail matters, remember it. Harold Beaumont's heirs, 2 adult sons living in Charlotte and a daughter in Scottsdale, wanted nothing to do with the place. The roof needed work. The HVAC was 30 years old. The dock pilings were rotting. They didn't want the headache. They didn't want the property taxes, which ran north of $60,000 a year. They wanted the money, fast, clean, and split 3 ways. Now here's where Catherine Mercer enters this part of the story. And I need you to understand something about this woman. She'd had the Palmetto Point listing for 7 months before Harold died. 7 months of staging consultations, 7 months of drone photography, 7 months of hosting wine and cheese previews for her hand-picked list of buyers from Savannah and Charleston and Atlanta. 7 months of telling everyone at the Hilton Head Association of Realtors that Palmetto Point was her crown jewel, her baby, her legacy listing. The asking price was $4.8 million. And then the heirs got impatient. They pulled the listing from Catherine's brokerage, just yanked it, no warning, no courtesy call, and sold it through a blind trust at $3.9. Nearly $1 million under asking. A discount sale. And Catherine Mercer, with her platinum blonde bob blown smooth, her coral and gold silk scarf knotted at her throat like a badge of rank, her pale blue eyes that could cut glass when she was angry, Catherine got nothing. No commission, no closing table, no handshake. 7 months of work, and somebody she'd never met, somebody she couldn't even identify because the trust shielded the buyer's name, walked away with the most prestigious waterfront estate on the island for less than she'd told her clients it was worth. She was furious. That fury is important too, because the buyer, of course, was Denise. Acquisition number 23, purchased through the Sullivan Carter Family Trust, managed by her attorney James Aldridge, the same James Aldridge with the rumpled beige linen jacket and the dark brown leather portfolio he carried everywhere like a security blanket. James handled the paperwork. James handled the wire. James made sure Denise's name appeared nowhere in the public record. She'd never set foot on the property. She'd studied the inspection reports, the surveys, the aerial photos, the engineering assessment on the dock pilings. She knew every square foot of that house on paper, but she'd never walked the floors, never smelled the jasmine, never stood on that veranda and watched the tide pull back through the creek. She scheduled a walkthrough with James for a Saturday morning. Quiet, private. Just the two of them before the Monday meeting with the renovation contractor. No fanfare, no entourage. Just Denise in her flat sandals and her notebook, walking the rooms of a house her grandmother would have entered through the service door. Catherine, meanwhile, had a different plan entirely. See, Catherine couldn't let Palmetto Point go. It gnawed at her. Whoever bought that property was going to need to furnish it, landscape it, maybe flip it. And when they did, Catherine wanted to be standing right there with her business card and her client list and her wide, bright smile that never reached those ice-chip eyes. So she did something bold, something reckless, something deeply, profoundly stupid. She arranged a broker open house at Palmetto Point for that same Saturday morning, without the new owner's knowledge, without anyone's permission. She still had the old lockbox code from her listing period. The heirs had never changed it because why would they? They were already in Charlotte counting their money, and she used it. She printed glossy flyers on heavy cardstock. She ordered 2 cases of champagne. She called her top 12 clients personally, one by one, and told them she had exclusive early access to a property about to undergo a major renovation, and if they wanted first look at what Palmetto Point could become, they needed to be there Saturday at 10. Her plan was simple: show the house, generate buzz, find a buyer willing to pay 5, maybe 5.5 after renovations, approach the new owner, whoever they were, with a ready-made offer and a pitch. Let me handle the resale, I'll waive half my commission, everybody wins. She'd claw back her fee, she'd reclaim her crown jewel. She had no idea who she was about to try to hustle. That same Saturday morning, 6:40 a.m., Denise stood in her grandmother's old hallway in Beaufort. The house was small and quiet, the walls still lined with Ruth Carter's framed photos. Denise paused in front of one. Ruth in her white uniform, unsmiling, dignified, standing on somebody else's porch. She pressed 2 fingers to the glass, held them there. Then she picked up the faded olive green canvas tote from the hallway table, her notebook already tucked inside, and walked out the front door. No makeup. The navy sundress with thin shoulder straps, the natural tan flat sandals, the thin gold wedding band catching the early Carolina light, her hair in that simple low twist, secured with the plain tortoiseshell clip. Denise pulled the 2012 Honda Accord out of her grandmother's old driveway in Beaufort, canvas tote on the passenger seat, notebook inside. She was driving to Hilton Head to see Palmetto Point for the first time. She had no idea Catherine Mercer was already inside. The live oaks closed over the road like a cathedral ceiling. Spanish moss hung low enough to brush the Honda's roof, and through the green tunnel Denise could see it, Palmetto Point, sitting at the end of the crushed shell driveway like a painting somebody left out in the sun to cure. White clapboard, deep wraparound porch, second-story balcony with wrought iron railings that caught the afternoon light and threw it back in thin gold lines. The marsh stretched behind it, silver green and endless, and the whole property smelled like salt and warm wood and pluff mud. Beautiful. Hers. But something was wrong. A white Range Rover sat in the driveway, brand new, tinted windows. A coral and gold silk scarf dangled from the rearview mirror of a vehicle that cost more than most people's houses. The front door of Palmetto Point was wide open, not ajar, open, like whoever was inside owned the place. They didn't. Denise parked the Honda behind the Range Rover. She sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, the thin gold wedding band catching a sliver of light through the windshield. The faded olive green tote sat on the passenger seat. The notebook was inside. She picked it up, slung it over her left shoulder, and stepped out onto the crushed shells. The air hit her skin like a warm towel. Cicadas screamed from the oaks. Somewhere in the marsh, a heron lifted off with a sound like tearing silk. Denise walked toward the porch steps in her natural tan flat sandals, unhurried, deliberate, the way she walked everywhere. The faint birthmark below her left ear was visible where her jet-black hair was pulled back in that simple, low twist, secured with the plain tortoiseshell clip. No makeup, no jewelry except the band. navy cotton sundress with thin straps, modest hemline below the knee. She looked like a woman running errands on a Saturday. She was the owner of a $9 million estate. Her foot hit the first porch step, and that's when the door darkened. Catherine Mercer appeared in the doorway like she'd been summoned by a silent alarm. Platinum blonde bob, smooth and blown out with that deep side part. Pale blue eyes already narrowed. The cream silk blouse was tucked into tailored white linen trousers without a single crease, and the coral and gold Hermès-style scarf was knotted at her throat like a badge of rank. Nude, patent leather pointed-toe heels clicked against the original heart pine floors as she stepped forward and planted herself in the center of the doorframe. She did not ask Denise her name, did not ask if she had an appointment, did not ask a single question at all. Catherine Mercer looked at a black woman in flat sandals stepping out of a 2012 Honda Accord, and she made her judgment in 3 seconds flat. "This is a private showing." The words hit the porch like a gunshot. Catherine's chin was lifted, one hand already on her hip, posture rigid, territorial. The small beauty mark on her right cheekbone sat above a smile that had nothing to do with warmth. Denise stopped on the second step. Calm, hands clasped loosely in front of her, expression unreadable. "I said this is a private showing. You can't just walk up to a $9 million property like you're picking up a pizza." Let that sit for a second. Like you're picking up a pizza. That's what Catherine Mercer said to the woman who owned the house she was standing in, to the woman whose grandmother's name was on the original deed, to the woman whose family built the dock out back with their own hands 60 years ago. Like you're picking up a pizza. Denise did not move. She stood on the second step, the warm breeze pulling at the hem of her sundress, and she looked at Catherine the way you look at weather. Something happening, something you can't control, something you simply observe. Catherine took that silence as weakness. They always do. "I can smell the thrift store on you from here." Catherine stepped forward, one heel clicking on the porch boards, closing the distance. "Get your filthy hands off that railing. Do not touch anything on this property." Denise's hands were clasped in front of her. She wasn't touching the railing. Didn't matter. Catherine saw what she wanted to see. Each insult landed like a slap, and Denise absorbed every single one without flinching. The freckles across the bridge of her nose caught the light. Her deep brown eyes stayed level. Her breathing stayed even. She was cataloging. Every word, every inflection, every ugly, dripping syllable. Catherine pulled her phone from her back pocket. She walked past Denise, close enough that the sharp edge of her shoulder nearly clipped Denise's arm, and marched down to the driveway. She aimed the phone at the Honda's rear bumper. Click! She photographed the license plate. Then she turned around, already dialing, and walked back up the steps with the phone pressed to her ear. "Brad, it's Catherine. You're not going to believe this." A laugh, light, musical, poisonous. Some woman just drove up to Palmetto Point in an old Honda. Flat sandals, canvas bag, another laugh. "People like you don't just wander onto properties like this." I told her. People like you. There it is, the quiet part. Loud. Denise waited until Catherine lowered the phone. Then she asked one question, calm, measured, almost gentle. "Are you the listing agent for this property?" Catherine's pale blue eyes snapped to her like Denise had spoken out of turn at a dinner party. "I am the agent for this entire island, sweetheart." "Sweetheart," said the way you'd say pest. Denise nodded, slowly. She reached into the faded olive green tote on her left shoulder and pulled out the notebook. She opened it. She uncapped a pen, and she began to write. Catherine watched this with the kind of amusement you'd give a dog chasing its tail. "Go ahead, write a letter. No one on this island is going to care." Denise kept writing, steady hand, unhurried strokes. She didn't look up, didn't respond, just wrote. And Catherine laughed again, turning away, lifting the phone back to her ear. "Brad, you should see this. Some woman off the street just tried to walk into the Palmetto Point showing." She stopped mid-sentence. Behind her, the crunch of crushed shells, tires rolling slow over the driveway, A silver Mercedes pulling in beside the Honda and the Range Rover. The engine cut, the driver's door opened, and the man stepping out, tall, broad-shouldered, silver-gray hair cropped short, rumpled beige linen jacket, dark brown leather portfolio tucked under his right arm, looked past Catherine Mercer entirely. His hazel eyes found the woman in the navy sundress standing on the porch, and his face went white. He was looking at Denise like she was the most important person on the island. James Aldridge walks up the porch steps, portfolio under his arm. He looks at Catherine. He looks at Denise. And then he says the 5 words that end Catherine Mercer's career. She's my boss. She owns it. 5 words. That's all it takes. 5 words delivered in that quiet, deferential tone of his posture slightly stooped the way it always is when he's talking to someone he respects, and the whole world tilts sideways for Catherine Mercer. Watch her face. I need you to watch it in slow motion, because it is a masterpiece of karma unfolding in real time. First, there's confusion. Genuine confusion. Her pale blue eyes flick between James and Denise like she's waiting for the punchline. Then, the disbelief. Her thin, arched eyebrows climb toward her platinum blonde hairline, and her mouth opens, just slightly, and nothing comes out. And then the blood drains. That faint sun flush across her cheeks? Gone. Replaced by something ashen, something sick. The coral and gold silk scarf knotted at her throat suddenly looks tight, too tight, like it's the only thing holding her head on. And James? James doesn't even glance at Catherine. He's already done with her. He opens the dark brown leather portfolio, the one he carries everywhere, the one tucked under his right arm like a second skin, and he starts talking to Denise about load-bearing walls, about the foundation inspection he ran last Tuesday, about whether she wants to keep the original heart pine floors or refinish them. He calls her Mrs. Carter. Every single time. Mrs. Carter, the east-facing windows need resealing. Mrs. Carter, the HVAC quote came in under budget. Mrs. Carter, I flagged the termite damage in the crawl space on page 14. Catherine Mercer is standing 6 feet away, and she does not exist. She is furniture. She is air. She is the thing you step around on the way to a conversation that matters. And honestly, that's the part that breaks her. Not the revelation, not the title, the invisibility. Because Catherine has never been invisible in her life. Catherine has always been the one making other people invisible. Denise listens to James for a full 2 minutes. She asks a question about the renovation timeline. She nods at something in the portfolio. She tucks a strand of jet black hair behind her ear, that simple low twist secured with the plain tortoiseshell clip catching the afternoon light, and then she turns. She turns to Catherine. Her voice is level, measured, devastating. No shouting, no trembling. Just facts delivered with the precision of someone who has dealt with people like Catherine Mercer before and knows exactly how to take them apart. You entered this property without authorization from the owner or the estate executor. You conducted commercial activity, staging, photographing, client walkthroughs, on private property without consent. You photographed my vehicle and ran or attempted to run my plates. You called law enforcement to remove me from my own property. And you threatened me with trespassing charges that you had no legal standing to make. Denise pauses. The thin gold wedding band on her left ring finger catches a sliver of sun as she clasps her hands loosely in front of her. You did all of that in the first 90 seconds of seeing my face before you asked a single question. 1 sentence. And it lands like a verdict, because that's exactly what it is. Catherine opened her mouth to respond, her lips parted, her hand drifted toward that scarf like she was going to adjust it, like fixing the accessory could fix the moment, but nothing came out. What do you say to that? What possible defense do you mount when every single accusation is true, and the woman you just humiliated is standing there with the calm, unreadable expression of someone who doesn't need to raise her voice because the facts are doing all the screaming? Then Denise points. Up, toward the corner of the porch, just under the eave, where a small black dome camera sits nestled against the clapboard siding. The seller's estate installed it, standard security for a vacant property in a high-value market, and it has been recording since Denise's 10-year-old sedan pulled into the crushed shell driveway. Every word, every insult, every laugh, every single moment Catherine Mercer spent treating a woman like garbage because she didn't look expensive enough to belong. Catherine's pale blue eyes find the camera, and her whole body goes still. Not calm still, pray still. The kind of still where your brain is running through every horrible thing you said and realizing that all of it, exists as a file now, time-stamped, uploadable, uneditable. Denise pulls her phone from the worn canvas tote bag on her left shoulder. She dials. She puts it on speaker, and she does not move away. She stands right there, 6 feet from Catherine, and lets her hear every word. Her attorney picks up on the second ring. Denise's voice stays even, the same composure, the same measured cadence, as she lays out the complaint she wants filed with the South Carolina Real Estate Commission. Unauthorized access to a property not listed by the agent's brokerage. Unlicensed commercial activity conducted without owner consent. Discriminatory conduct toward the property owner based on appearance. She gives dates, times, the address, the name of the camera system. Her attorney says he'll have the formal filing drafted within the hour. Catherine's hands are shaking now. The sharp, angular jawline is clenched so tight you can see the muscle jumping beneath that fair pink skin. But Denise isn't done. She makes one more call. This one to the managing broker at Harrington and Cole. She introduces herself as Denise Carter, principal of Carter Shoreline Holdings. She lets that name sit in the air for a moment. Then she explains, still calm, still level, still that same quiet dignity, that Carter Shoreline Holdings controls 23 coastal properties across the Lowcountry that Harrington and Cole has been actively courting for listing agreements over the past 18 months, and that as long as Catherine Mercer is employed by their firm, not a single one of those properties will ever pass through their doors. The silence on the other end of the line is deafening, the kind of silence where you can hear a career ending. Denise ends the call with the managing broker at Harrington and Cole. She slides her phone back into the canvas tote. She looks at Catherine, who is standing in the driveway next to her Range Rover, mascara streaking, scarf askew, hands shaking. Denise says nothing more. She turns and walks through the front door of her own house for the first time. Within 48 hours, Catherine Mercer's world collapses like a house with no foundation, which is ironic because Denise Carter is the one person who would have spotted that. See, here's the thing about doorbell cameras. People forget they exist. Catherine sure as hell forgot. She was too busy screaming, too busy pointing that manicured finger, too busy letting every ounce of venom drip off her tongue to notice the little black lens mounted 6 inches from the doorframe. But the camera didn't forget Catherine. The camera remembered everything, and somebody shared it. A local journalist out of Charleston, young, hungry, the kind who checks community forums at midnight, she picks up the footage first, doesn't even need to editorialize. She just posts the clip with one line of context and lets Catherine Mercer do all the talking herself. The headline writes itself, "I can smell the thrift store on you." That's it. That's the quote, direct from Catherine's own coral-glossed lips, captured in crisp 1080p audio with the afternoon sun lighting up every sneer, every dismissive flick of that platinum blonde bob, every moment she stood on someone else's porch and acted like she owned the ground beneath it. 72 hours. That's all it takes. The clip doesn't just go viral, it detonates. Millions of views, not thousands, millions. Every platform picks it up. Comment sections turn into infernos. People are tagging Harrington and Cole's business page, their Google reviews, their LinkedIn profiles. They're screenshotting Catherine's bio from the company website, the one with the professional headshot where she's wearing that coral and gold silk scarf knotted just so at her throat, chin lifted, pale blue eyes aimed at the camera like she's daring you to question her place in the world. That photo becomes a meme by Tuesday afternoon. And inside the offices of Harrington and Cole, the temperature drops to absolute zero. The managing broker, the same man Denise had calmly, quietly spoken to on the phone, He watches the footage 3 times. Then he watches it a 4th time with the sound off, just studying Catherine's body language. The rigid posture, the hand on the hip, the way she steps forward into Denise's space like she's trying to physically push her off her own property. He closes his laptop. He picks up his phone. He calls an emergency partners meeting for 7 a.m. the next morning. Nobody sleeps well that night, because here's what they already know, what Catherine was apparently too arrogant to comprehend. Carter Shoreline Holdings manages a portfolio worth $187 million in coastal South Carolina real estate. That's not a client, that's the client. That's the kind of account that keeps the lights on in a brokerage for a decade. And Catherine Mercer didn't just fumble it. She didn't just drop the ball. She picked the ball up, set it on fire, and threw it through a window. On camera, while screaming about thrift stores. The partners' meeting lasts 40 minutes. 40 minutes to undo 7 years of Catherine's tenure at the firm. They draft the statement before lunch. Harrington and Cole releases it at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. They use all the right words. Values, standards, zero tolerance for conduct that contradicts our commitment to professionalism and respect. Corporate language, scrubbed clean, every syllable vetted by legal. But everyone reading between those polished lines knows exactly what it means. Catherine Mercer is done. They escort her from the building the same afternoon. Not metaphorically, literally. A security guard walks her to her desk. She packs 1 box. Her coral and gold scarf is slightly crooked as she carries it through the lobby, and for the first time, she doesn't fix it. Her pale blue eyes are glassy, unfocused, like she's watching the whole thing happen to someone else. The glass doors close behind her with a soft, pneumatic hiss that sounds, honestly, like the building exhaling. But the dominoes aren't done falling, not even close. The South Carolina Real Estate Commission opens a formal investigation within the week. Catherine's license, the credential she built her entire identity around, the thing that made her somebody in every room she walked into, is suspended pending review. Suspended, not revoked yet, but that yet is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and everybody knows it. 3 of her existing clients drop her before Friday. One of them sends a 2-line email. The other 2 don't even bother with that. They just call Harrington and Cole directly and request reassignment. Nobody wants their name within 100 miles of that footage. Nobody wants to be the person who kept doing business with the woman the internet now calls Thrift Store Catherine. That's the name that sticks, by the way. It trends for 3 straight days. And then comes the part that cuts deepest. Catherine's husband, Judge Robert Mercer. Appointed to the bench 6 years ago, well-connected, well-regarded, the kind of man who plays golf with state legislators and sits on charitable boards with his name engraved on little brass plaques. He's built a careful, deliberate public life. And now, his wife is the most hated woman on the internet for screaming coded racial contempt at a black woman on her own front porch. The political calculus is brutal and simple. He can't stand next to this. He won't. Judge Mercer issues a public statement. It's 3 paragraphs long. He refers to Catherine's actions as deeply troubling and inconsistent with the principles of dignity and fairness he upholds in his courtroom. He does not use the word love. He does not use the word wife more than once. He uses the word regrettable. That one word tells you everything about where this marriage is headed. Regrettable. Like she's a ruling he wishes he could vacate. And while all of this is happening, the viral clip, the termination, the investigation, the husband's cold, legal distancing, you know where Denise Carter is? She's at Palmetto Point, walking through the building with a contractor, her plain navy sundress brushing just below her knees, those natural tan flat sandals quiet on the old hardwood, the worn olive canvas tote on her left shoulder, her thin gold wedding band catching a slant of afternoon light as she points at a load-bearing wall and explains exactly why it matters. She's checking the bones of the structure, running her hand along a joist, pressing her thumb into a window frame to test for rot, the same way her grandmother taught her. Feel first, then look, then decide. She's building something, while Catherine's world burns to the foundation. Catherine's husband, a local judge, issues a public statement distancing himself from his wife's conduct. He does not use the word love. He uses the word regrettable. Catherine sits alone in her white Range Rover in the Harrington and Cole parking lot, staring at the building she is no longer allowed to enter. Denise never does an interview. Not one. Reporters call the law firm. The law firm says, no comment. And that silence is louder than anything Catherine ever screamed on that porch. Think about that for a second. The woman who just won everything, the estate, the case, the moral high ground, she doesn't post a single thing online. No Instagram story, no victory selfie in front of the property she now legally owns, no press conference with a podium and a microphone and a carefully worded statement about justice prevailing. Nothing. Zero. The person they don't see coming is the person who sees everything, and Denise sees everything. She lets the footage speak for itself. That body cam clip, that 911 recording, Catherine's own shrill voice doing more damage than any lawyer's opening statement ever could. Denise doesn't need to add commentary. The evidence is the commentary. And while the internet argues and the cable news panels dissect and Catherine's name trends for all the wrong reasons, Denise is already doing something else entirely. She's renovating Palmetto Point. Not flipping it, not gutting it for resale, transforming it. The old estate, 3 stories of low-country architecture with wraparound porches and original heart pine floors and a view of the marsh that makes your chest ache. Denise turns it into a luxury retreat, a place where people can come and rest, where the land does what land is supposed to do, which is hold people up instead of keeping them out. She hires 14 local residents for the renovation and the staff. 14. Not contractors flown in from Charleston or Savannah, people from the island, people whose families have been here for generations. 2 of those women, Gloria Sims and Mae Frances Drayton, worked on Ruth Carter's old cleaning crew back in the day. They scrubbed these same floors 30 years ago. They polished these same banisters. They washed these same windows and were told to use the side entrance because the front door was for guests and family only. They enter through the front door now. Gloria told a local reporter, one of the only quotes anyone connected to Denise ever gave, that walking through that front entrance on her first day felt like putting down something she'd been carrying her whole life. She didn't say what it was. She didn't have to. Carter Shoreline becomes the largest employer of local tradespeople on the island. Electricians, plumbers, landscapers, painters. Denise pays above market. Every single time. Her project manager asks her once if they should consider more competitive bids from off-island firms, and Denise just looks at him. Doesn't say a word. He never asks again. She remembers what her grandmother's hands looked like after 30 years of cleaning other people's houses. The swollen knuckles, the cracked skin around the nails that no amount of cocoa butter could fully soften. Hands that built someone else's comfort and came home too tired to build their own. Denise pays above market because she knows exactly what below market costs. It costs your hands. It costs your back. It costs the years you don't get to spend watching your own family grow because you're too busy pressing someone else's linen. Now let's talk about Catherine, because you know I wasn't going to let her just fade out quietly. The South Carolina Real Estate Commission revokes her license. Permanently. Not suspended, not under review. Gone. The disciplinary letter cites ethical violations, conduct unbecoming, and a pattern of discriminatory client steering that the investigation uncovered once they started pulling her transaction records. Turns out that body cam footage was just the door. Behind it was a whole damn house of problems. Her husband, the judge, remember him? The one who used the word regrettable instead of love? He files for divorce 3 weeks later. Quiet filing. No press statement this time. Just paperwork. Catherine tries to rebrand. And honestly, this part is almost sad. Almost. She sets up a website calling herself a lifestyle consultant, coastal living, interior aesthetics, curated island experiences. The website has a stock photo of a woman who is not Catherine walking on a beach at sunset. The contact form sits empty. Nobody calls. Nobody emails, nobody books a consultation, because the island has a long memory and a short fuse for embarrassment. People here don't forget. They just stop inviting you to things. They stop returning your waves at the farmer's market. They stop holding the door. And eventually you realize you're not being punished. You're just being erased, which is worse. Catherine Mercer, who once walked into every room on this island like she held the deed to the air inside it, that coral and gold scarf knotted at her throat like a flag of territory, she becomes the woman people talk about in past tense while she's still living here. That's not justice. That's geography. Now,